Well, thanks, Jake. And first of all, congratulations on your podcast. That's an exciting venture, and I wish you the best with it. I like your name, the Untrained uh, idea that just normal people sharing ideas with each other, because I think that's most hunters, and it's easy to get caught up in maybe trying to be an expert or something, and we all want to grow, but the reality is we're all just learning as we go, and if we kind of pull away some of that mystique, I think that's just normal people talking. I think it's a lot to learn that way. So yeah, I wish you the best. Yeah, I
Appreciate
grew up.
that.
Yes, sir. I grew up in Iowa, and on a farm. There wasn't tons of wildlife, and I mean there was hunting around there, but my family never did any of it. And then when I was around 13, my brother-in-law taught me trapping, and I really got bit, and that's kind of how I earned some extra cash through school and yeah, middle school, high school, and I just really enjoyed the whole thing. Really got into it. Didn't do any deer hunting at the time. A little pheasant, small game hunting, not a lot, but always kept the bug. Always loved hearing, get together, family get-togethers. A lot of my in-laws hunt, and so that was fun sitting around, keeping up to date with that. But about 10, 12 years ago, my son took archery lessons in had an archery class in school, in middle school. I took him over to a neighbor who is a real expert. He's in his, well, he's 60s now, but he's been hunting since he was a teenager. Actually had to put food on his mom's table. He is an avid hunter. And as he was giving my son lessons, I kind of got bit by the whole thing. Well, why wouldn't I learn how to do this too? If my son's going to go hunting, why wouldn't I? And then I really got bit by, so I've been archery hunting, since then and just really enjoy it. Um, we just have 5 acres here, but it's, well, the back 2 acres is a creek bottom with trees and stuff that connects two larger pieces of timber. So we have deer. I mean, I found a beautiful shed on the lawn a few years ago. I mean, a big boy. And, so they're coming through here, and we have deer through here all the time, but you're not hunting, bedding areas and all this kind of stuff, because they're not really living here. But it's enough to hunt, which is a lot of fun. I've learned a method of hunting that I can really draw the deer in, with, and, that's a lot of fun. That's actually, um, a guy named Jerry Everhart here in Ohio. He's now in his 80s, I believe, but, he's been hunting for years, taking, field notes every time he's in the field. I mean, extensive. And 20 years ago, 30 years ago, he sat down, looked through all of his notes, and noted on a calendar the days that he saw deer in the field, weather conditions, time of day, all of that, barometric pressures and stuff. And of course, no surprise to anybody of your listeners and viewers, there's a pretty steep bell curve that if you're in the Midwest, somewhere in that early November, you're going to see a disproportionate. I've heard people say, well, talk to the people at the body shops, and when they have all the deer hits, it's, so there's a steep bell curve, and we all kind of know that. But what he did was, he looked at different things in nature, moon phase, quarter moon, full moon, whatever, and tried to find a correlation up. And he found these dates moved forward and backward each year, a day or two, 3 days. It wasn't exactly the same calendar date. And when he overlaid them with the daylight tables, the rate of change of sunlight, it was like turning the binoculars at one click further, and it overlaid exactly. So he has this whole, he calls it rut functional style of hunting. So, it starts with, your stand selection, in relationship to trails and stuff. And then he heavily relies on, licking branches and scrapes. And instead of maybe one or two at a stand, he'll do 6 or 8. I mean, a pile of them. And with that, and his wall is just packed full of Pope and Young, quality deer he gets almost every year. Now in his 80s, I don't know if he still is, but, and he was, a traditional bow, shooting fingers. I mean, limited gear, and he was knocking down this big stuff and climbing the ladder very few times because he used his date calculation and this, rut, function is what he calls it, but using the scrapes and licking branches to draw them in. And then you have the advantage of if a buck comes in, he's stopping to scrape or smell it. You don't have to, whistle at him. He's already stopped, has his attention on something else. So I figured if it's, the proof's in the pudding when I look at his wall. And so I've really adopted a lot of that here. And it is so fun. I got to where, right now I've got a stand. It's a elevated blind I built so I could hunt a little more often because I have such a small property. Takes no time at all to burn it out, a stand. So I hunt out of this little blind, and it overlooks the back corner of our property, which goes beyond the creek bottom out into a field. So I just got a little triangle of land out there. It's wide open. There's no tree. And I did this a couple of years ago. I put in a couple of T-posts and tied a branch across the top with a rope hanging, and they use them all the time. So I get to enjoy hunting more year round. I have food plots too. I'm little, maybe 3/4 acre total. And so I get to mess around with this stuff all year long. And then my intent is to draw them in. I can use, in Ohio, we can use mineral. I do that. And, so I'm able to hunt on a tiny property. It's just a different way of hunting. Now the handy part is I got a 5-minute walk to the stand. So,
Right.
these guys that are out 2 miles backpacking on public, I mean, hats off. That's incredible. And then you're out fighting, with, all the impact of other people. That's a whole different level.
Well, I'm going to stop you quick just
Yeah.
before we get too much in the weeds on certain things, but I maybe want you to touch on a little bit more about you starting hunting maybe later in life. Because you said you started kind of heavily get into it, what, 10 to 12 years
Yeah.
ago?
Yeah. So I was, my mid to late 40s, and, I had enough interest. I always enjoyed reading about hunting. I mean, I got Outdoor Life and stuff, especially as a kid, but I was always, if we stop, be at somebody's place and see a big buck, ask about it. Like I say, my brothers-in-law, hearing their stories. So I always had a big interest in it. I just never pursued archery hunting, and, learning, you know, archery, just at target archery, it's pretty, intoxicating. I mean, it's pretty addictive, and you can just, it's peaceful. I like shooting my handguns and stuff, but, just to go out there in the evening and sling a few arrows, it's just, I mean, it can be kind of frustrating when you're, not doing so well, but I mean, it's very relaxing. It's peaceful.
Therapeutic almost in a way.
It is. It is. And then when stuff is kind of flowing, it's just like, oh. And then to be able to be out in the woods and be that close interaction with the animal, seeing a doe come in and a buck, and you start realizing, wait, oh, wow, that's like a different animal altogether. My heart's pounding now. And, it's the allure of maybe a big one will come in today. It just keeps you going back out there. The getting up in the morning out of a warm bed when it's dark and windy isn't, appealing. But then, once I get moving, it's all good, and you get out there. And, so I, I've always been, like I said, enjoyed the outdoors as a kid, but being on a farm, it was more just being outside, not as much hunting. But the trapping, I really got the bug for that. So that was, but like I said, that was kind of the extent of it. But so I think it's easy for me I feel like I'm still a newbie at it, because, man, like I said, 10, 12 years, and I'm not doing the public land stuff and spot and stalk I mean, the guys up in the Northwest, that the only way they get a buck is go out and track them in the snow and look for the big tracks. And, the guys out west, I mean, there's the thing that's, I think, is cool about hunting is everybody does what's in their culture for their area, and it works. The guys in the South, I don't know if they still use buckshot. I know they used to. There's some areas you can't hunt without, corn, without bait. You're not even going to see a deer. And when it's legal in that state, I think it's great. So whatever's legal, but there's just all different kinds of, some of the guys are out, shooting a stick bow, and, you can just level up all kinds of ways.
There's so many
And
different ways to do virtually the
yeah,
same thing
yeah,
that
yeah,
fits you. And I kind of want to bring this back to, you kind of said you've created your own system. getting into the game later in life. It
Right.
can be a lot of stuff. The hunting space is very overwhelming with the amount of information. Like for someone new looking at it, getting into it, saying, what should I do to be successful? And I think you kind of brought up some good points about, maybe talking to someone that's local to you that you're seeing has success in your area, one. And two, like you said, you only hunt 5 acres. You can't
Right.
hunt that same 5 acres and be successful as someone who has 1,000. So maybe talk a little bit about that, more in depth about, just the importance and maybe your system
Hmm.
get into a little bit more about your system and how you've kind of gone about being successful and finding success on that 5 acres, that small property, and kind of talking to someone local to you to try to figure out, hey, this is what they're doing, it's working, and then not trying to do things outside the realm of what would work for you in your situation.
Yeah, I think especially early on, I listened, I soaked in podcasts, and when because I'm on the road a lot, and uh, that was a plus and a minus because I didn't understand how to, just exactly what you're saying, how to correlate what this guy was talking about is maybe good information, but he's in a completely different situation than I am. So then I'm trying to come home and recreate this on 5 acres, and it's not the same thing. So I think when I stumbled across Jerry Everhart, and he used to have a podcast called the Hunt Fish Journal. In fact, on our website, if you scroll down, go on the menu and scroll down to the bottom of all the links, there's a link there that says Rut Functional. And in there, there's about, I forget, 6 or so podcasts that the Hunt Fish Journal did. It's not active anymore, but the podcasts are still there that you can go on and listen through. The opener is kind of his overview of the science in his background to how he came up with his system. Um, and if you're especially Midwest and North too, uh, it is so informative. And this guy's just a real down to earth, and he hunts maybe 60 some acres. So again, he doesn't have a giant preserve. He has exclusive rights to it, so he can control the pressure. But when I heard his story, it was very down to earth. It was something I could replicate on our little property. And so, it was so, yeah, it was relatable and applicable to my application. And then we've got enough open space that I can put in a couple of food plots, and that, obviously they're all around us anyways. I mean, they walk through our yard at night, and yeah, but, to get them, to just try to draw them here more of the year around, the food plots do that. I put out, in the spring. And here's another little thing I learned. And a lot of this was from the food plot stuff was from Grant Woods,
Yep.
with, growing gear. I found out you can overseed soybeans and they're going to grow. So you don't have to have big farm tillage. I have a 4-wheeler and a lawn spreader. And so in the spring, I do soybeans. And then in late summer, I'll overseed, rye, winter rye. And you have to do at least double, especially of the rye, to get it to come up because you're just overseeding it. You got to put it in heavy. But then you got something green most of the year. They love the soybeans in the summer. In the winter, they'll eat the pods, finish the pods off. And then in the spring, that rye is the first green stuff around, and it's high protein. I mean, so you're giving them a reason to stay on your property. And then between that and then the licking branches, what I found with these licking branches is, I don't know how small of a property you can hunt deer on, but really small. So I think it can be discouraging for people to find big property and I don't have access and whatever. And that definitely is frustrating. But, um, if, if you can, if you can change your property so that it's a different way of hunting. You're trying to make the deer come to you. And, here in Ohio, we can use corn too. So I may or may not have added that to the mix the other year, but it's legal here. So, but you're getting the deer to come to you. And they'll stop because they're licking the salt. But if you can't have salt, if you can't have, um, corn, the licking branches do the same thing because they're going to come in there and check them. And so, each one just adds on top of the other. So that was stuff that I could relate with. That's something I could apply here to this little property. Across the road, there's about 15 acres of woods, but it's all high timber. I can hunt about a 5 acre spot of that woods, but there's no understory. There's houses all along two sides of it, and then row crops the other two sides. It's not. You have about 6 or 8 does that live in there, but I've seen some pretty nice bucks in there. In fact, there was a monster. It's like 16 points ish. I don't know what he was. Big boy. A couple of years ago, my neighbor and I were both watching him, and I was waiting for early November. Right at Halloween, we had an unusually really cold snap for about a few days or a week. Um, I had him on. I had him on my, well, anyway, somebody from out of state shot him in the next woods, like adjoining ours, like the one that I hunt him is 200 yards from my stand. He was visiting and hunted on his friend's property and shot this massive buck. And, it was right during those days. And then later when I checked my trail cam, he was at my feeder about 10 that morning. So probably the day he met his end. My point being, you wouldn't hunt this timber to see that big of a buck. But when you have stuff there that makes him want to come in and check, there's does there anyways. You put the licking branches out, then the big bucks are going to come in and check. And so, um,
I think it's kind of interesting to think about it that way, and just to realize, using that broader scope, just taking a step back and looking at it. Yes, it's only, your property might only be 5 acres or so, but you can look at the surrounding properties, what's there. If that surrounding property is very, very good and it holds deer, you would
right.
think eventually at some point during the year they're going to come through, especially when you're doing what you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
implementing these attractions, whether that's licking branches, um, whether you just strictly thicken it up and make bedding there so there are a few deer that live there, whatever you
Right.
do, licking branches to make them stop, um, it's more than it's just 5 acres. It's,
Right.
looking at it in the grand scheme of things. And I'm sure you have to be pretty patient to have success and hunt that. You can't, everybody wants to be out there every Saturday, Sunday, or whenever they have time, but you can burn out a small property
Yeah.
super fast. So,
Yeah.
nailing down, that's one nice thing about having a small property, I think, is being able to nail down, your access, which way the wind usually goes through there, where you need to have your stand locations or stand location, you
Right.
know. Um,
Yeah.
just being able to really dial that property in, I feel like is probably pretty cool because you do all this thing, put all this work into it and really figure it out, run trail cameras, figure out what times a year they like to use it, and then focus your time then. And then
Yeah.
when it works out, I feel like that could be probably pretty rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's very fulfilling. And knowing that you had this kind of interaction on some level, whatever you want to call it, throughout the year, that you did these things that created this environment that made it attractive to them. This Jerry Everhart, he wrote an algorithm to do that calculation for the rate of change of sunlight to find the day when it crosses kind of over that line. My understanding is when that sunlight hits to a certain point of the amount of sunlight per day, it triggers, um, like the hormone, what puts the does into heat. Now, they don't all come into heat all in one day. Obviously, there's all these outliers. And big bucks are shot probably every day of hunting season, I suppose, at some point. But obviously, how do you hit this steep bell curve on the money if you can? Especially either if you only have so many days you can take for vacation, or if you have a tiny property, you can't be out there hunting it every day. You're going to burn the thing out. So actually rely on his calculator. It used to take him about a half an hour to hand calculate per location because each latitude, longitude things shift. And so he had a guy write the program for it. And so, he used to host it on his site. Well, he doesn't run his site anymore. So we host it on our site, this calculator you can buy if that isn't appealing to someone, if that idea is appealing, um, to try to stack more cards in your favor, like on the days that you go out to make it feel like it's going to be more effective. I use it just so I know, yeah, what those days should be for our area. Um,
And that's kind of feeds into your whole plan too, I bet. Like if you follow that system and you figure out this is the peak time, whether that's, I'm guessing it's basing it off of, you said movement or when the rut is going to be in your area or,
Yeah, yeah. Basically, the days that where the does are not quite, most of them are not quite ready yet, but I mean, their bodies are changing, and the buck. What happens is the bucks, and I'm just repeating everything I've learned from Jerry, so I'm not the expert in this, but when the majority of does are just about to go into heat, the bucks can scent that, but if the does are not physically ready yet, they're kind of hunkering down, and the bucks shift from nighttime to 24/7, and they're not, obviously there's always outliers, right? So he's just talking about the majority. So the majority of does still lock down, the majority of bucks starting to cruise during the daytime, but they're not chasing around yet like crazy because those being a lot of them bedded down, they're in the thick stuff. So these bucks start wandering around during the daytime and not finding anything, but they're looking, and there's several days of that, and then before the does come out, and then you got another few days of the first hard hit before they lock down and with the does and stuff. So the target is those few days when the bucks are running or walking 24/7, but there's not much doe activity yet. It's a little window in there.
and
Again,
I'm
I'm
sure
I'm
there,
not the expert. I'm repeating everything
yeah.
I've learned from Jerry.
And I'm
Yeah,
sure during that time, I mean, you're kind of explaining that time when they're, really starting to lay down sign. They're putting on a lot of miles. They could be
right,
miles away from where, their summer or their early season range was,
right,
where their food source is. And, like those
right.
licking branches, they're hitting scrapes, they're making scrapes, hitting licking branches.
Yeah,
And the activity, everybody talks about that, like
right,
scrape week or,
right,
pre-rut, everybody's favorite time, that
right.
transitional period between their bed to food to now they're switching to they know that those does are coming in. They
Yeah,
they've either bred those same does years prior or they know when that group's going to come in, and then that there's usually, like you said, kind of that handful of days or so that transitional period which you're kind of talking about. So yeah, that
yeah,
setting your
yeah.
property
That's
up for
it.
that, like a small property like
Yes.
that with licking branches, they're going to come through there
Yeah.
at some point.
Yep.
It seems like.
Yeah. 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 So you had asked about so my brother-in-law who taught me how to trap. He's been a hunter since he was real young. Another brother-in-law of ours. So those two married two of my sisters. He's been an avid hunter since he was, I don't know, 16 or 14, or well, probably before. He grew up in Pennsylvania, deer camp kind of culture. So back in maybe 2017 or so, yeah, so he's been importing, buying, roasting coffee for years. And he saw that, well, there's nobody really marketing directly in the hunting community. And, so he created a blend. He called it Hunter's Blend. And at that time, the idea was to get into wholesale, Cabela's and that. So, he had approached Ken, the brother-in-law who taught me how to hunt or how to trap. He approached us too, and proposed pooling our resources and to work on this coffee thing. So in 2018, that's when Hunter's Blend became an actual company. So it's us three brothers, and so it's called Hunter's Blend just because we all like hunting. But fairly quickly on, we were advised, and I think it was I firmly believe it was the right thing, that we'd be a lot better off going direct to consumer rather than right away trying to tackle a big box. We didn't know, so it made sense, and it was turned out to be really good advice. We just it's just really top shelf coffee. It's the top 6% of coffee. The score is usually around 84, somewhere in that range, which it's a specialty grade coffee, which is about, like I said, 6%. It's all strictly high grown coffee, and then we roast and ship it fresh. Paul is the roaster, so he handles everything on the coffee side. He does the buying and the roasting and that, and then it's normally like if somebody makes an order, it's shipped with it's been roasted, well, 2 or 3 days before it's shipped. I mean, it's about as fresh as you can get. All of our bags have a one-way valve on them because coffee off gases for about a week or so after it's roasted. And that gas has to relieve or it would blow up the bag. And so it all goes out through this one-way valve. You don't want any oxygen coming in because that's going to degrade the coffee, start to make it go stale. So a lot of times when you get the coffee, when you open up your mailbox, you'll smell it because it's been, releasing the extra pressure in there. So it's a top shelf coffee that's roasted fresh. It's hard to beat. It's not the cheapest coffee out there. I mean, it's like anything else. If top quality just costs more. And so, it's, we have to pay for it and it's just reflected in the price. But then you get a real smooth finish. And, we have basically a dark, medium and light roast and a flavored roast and decaf. And, so, uh, and then, along the way, we support a lot of, hunting organizations. NWTF is one that we've do a lot of stuff with. I should say a lot. All their different chapters will reach out for fundraisers and we'll work with them. But, we just we'll just support different, hunting and outdoor organizations. We also support, pro-life, organizations and some patriot community stuff. I think before being hunters, before being outdoorsmen, um, I think being an American is comes before all of that. And for us guys, before being an American becomes we're all Christ followers. And I think if you keep those priorities in line, um, it makes all the difference. And not that we do a perfect job of it by any chance, but
Right.
that's the desire, that's the goal. And if we do that and put our money where our mouth is, put our feet, let your actions back up what you say, then the other things are going to line up. So uh, I think as much as we love hunting, there's things that in our minds come above that. But hunting is possible because of these other things. We couldn't have hunting if we didn't have, I mean, the early settlers they didn't know what to do with all this wildlife, and you can just go hunt it. You don't have to ask the king. This isn't necessarily the norm around the world, that you have the freedom to go to hunt, and obviously the freedom, to bear arms. That's not, but those all come from, the freedom of being American. And those freedoms our founders recognized come from God, not the king. And so our creator is the one who gives it. You have an inalienable right to life. Your life is sacred. Your property is sacred. So you go back to the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill. That's more, murder is really the word. A person's life is sacred. You can't just go take it indiscriminately. His property is sacred. You can't just go take it. And his wife is sacred. You can't go take her indiscriminately. And those rights don't come from a king or a president, or it's from God. So all of even if somebody doesn't really believe in God, we all have the benefits of living in a country where the founders knew that fundamental truth and framed everything off of that. We all get to reap those rewards in this. And so we do get to go hunting. We do get to enjoy, all the stuff that we're talking about.
And you bring up a lot of good things there to think about. And to get back to, we can talk a little bit more about, your faith and how that plays into the brand and yourself. But I just want to take a step back here for a second because you kind of mentioned, coffee before that. But as far as, saying, this isn't the most affordable, whatever, we're direct to consumer. So it's not like it's at Walmart. You can see it and grab it or whatever. But I think people appreciate knowing where their money's going, supporting a company that, like you said, is very faith based and very supportive of these organizations that really make it possible for us to keep hunting and have opportunities like NWTF, like you said, a CI for, Western guys, like things like that people don't really realize. They might walk down the aisle at the store and see a deer or, these certain companies maybe market to hunters that they're not supporting these organizations. They're not, they don't know where your money's going.
Mm.
They say, they market to you, and then they put a deer or a hunter on the package, and you assume that, oh, well, it's expensive. They must be doing something with the money that's worthwhile, but a lot of times that's not the case. Just the reassurance that someone can have, knowing a little bit about where their money's going when they're supporting a company like Hunter's Blend, um, versus someone else that, that maybe get into that a little bit more.
Well, and I see, what comes to my mind is sometimes is just the other side of that coin. Sometimes when you put a deer sticker on a product, it's all of a sudden 2 or 3 times more expensive. And I've just started buying, store brand, scent free, what is it? Hygienic detergent. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but I think that's what I use anyway. Sometimes if you put a deer sticker on something, all of a sudden it gets more expensive. Is it different and better, or is it just the same stuff rebranded? Um, so, or worse, some brands that you don't stop to think about, they're actually actively not so much in the hunting community, but maybe some clothing lines, some of these companies, again, not, I don't think in Cabela's, let's say, right? But clothing brands that are kind of geared towards outdoor hiking, whatever. And some of these brands are actually actively, against hunting or Second Amendment. It's like, when I see some people wearing some of the brands, I'm like, I don't, it always kind of catches my whatever. Like, you don't really realize who you are supporting there. And so there's kind of those both sides of the coin. That's just the more negative side of the coin. And in our case, our coffee, it costs us more. So we have to charge, to make a reasonable profit. So it's not, it's the cost, it's the same price as if we were not in the hunting world. It doesn't have anything to do with we do have a deer, antlers on part of our logo. So it's not, that's not the reason, for the cost. It's the actual, quality. But, um, there's one, organization we've done some stuff with, and they're not, um, directly outdoors related, but I tell everybody it's called SCTP, Scholastic, Clay Trap Program. It's the, trap shooting for kids. And, we were approached actually at the NWTF, to work with them. And so we started, and, the first year, it was in 2020. So it was right after all the lockdowns and stuff. And, it was our first kind of go out in public. We had been at NWTF that in February. Of course, that was in Nashville. So that was they weren't quite that was really before everything went completely off the rails. So it was just kind of starting. And so we went through that lockdown thing and insanity. So this was the first event after that. And it was here local. There's a big, event center here where uh, that hosts, this nationals, different organizations coming in for trap shooting. So we went there. We had a booth for, serve coffee at this SCPP, and I was astounded. Well, number one, every morning everybody stops and you hear the national anthem, and everybody stops. It's not just business, but the kids. The kids were all, yes sir, thank you ma'am. I mean, just crazy polite, no trash. You got people riding around in, $60,000, side by sides or whatever, with $20,000 worth of shotguns in the back, and they'll pull up and park and walk away and then come back a while later and get in and drive off. Nobody's stealing anything. There was a sheriff every now and then rode through on a little golf cart, putter through, just kind of, and I was just like, where are we? These are such amazing, down to earth, decent people. So we would talk to them, and they're like, oh yeah, this is a different organization. This is different people. And you could just feel it. And so a lot of those kids, probably do become hunters, but they're all at least understand their Second Amendment right. They understand gun safety. And, so it's not directly, um, uh, outdoors related, but it's an organization that I wish I would have known about when our kids were young, because it's called SCPP. It's just, amazing people, and your kids learn a great skill. They actually have scholarships. Some of the colleges do scholarships for their trap shooting teams. So that's just, yeah, another one that I kind of have a soft spot for those guys.
Awesome. Yeah. I think just knowing and people listening to this, just know, when you're supporting someone like you guys, like Hunter's Blend, that, that extra price tag is going towards good people and people that support good organizations like you just talked about. I think it's kind of coming around with everything. Things are more expensive just by nature, just with everything going on now. It's just, we're not going to go backwards, um, or drastically backwards to what things used to cost. And that's just the reality of it. But with anything, when you put that made in America, sticker on it, it's just going to be more expensive because that's just the nature of how things work. You know what you're getting. Uh,
Mhm.
the craftsmanship, the quality, the people behind it. It's just that's what you're paying for. And I think people are starting to kind of realize that and kind of starting to support some American made companies in the more recent times, I guess.
I
So,
think so. And I think with some of these changes that are coming down the pike, we are going to see more manufacturing coming home, and it is higher quality. That used to always be what it meant, higher quality. And then it became about price. And, but we're going to be getting higher quality. And, we have to be honest. The stuff that's coming in so cheap. Well, why is it so cheap? I mean, some of these countries, we're honest. We're going to call it slave labor. I mean, in some cases. And so that's not really honest. I can't really, can I really, can I really live my life and say that I'd rather a basic slave made this thing and gave it to me cheaper than if I paid somebody a realistic wage. Now, we have stuff here in America that inflates the cost unnecessarily when you look at all the government regulations, red tape, and all that kind of stuff that puts the boot on the neck of American ingenuity. I mean, that stuff needs to change too. And you can't, but so yeah, I pray that that changes too. But, yeah, as we get more and more manufacturing here, and that's going to help. Think of all the jobs, and a lot of these manufacturing is going to be in smaller communities, and it's going to really impact, yeah, everybody. It's going to lift everybody up. And then we're going to have better quality products, like you said, and we can be proud. Yes, it's made in the USA. So
and
these mugs, go
you
ahead.
guys are out of Ohio
Yes.
in the
Yep.
States, like you said. Get into a little bit more. You touched on it in your overview about the company itself, Hunter's Blend. Um, just go into a little bit more about just like that small town. You guys are located in Ohio in the States. You do everything. I'm sure you import the beans from somewhere, but everything else past that is all US, all
Yeah.
in Ohio.
So,
So,
yeah. So the only coffee that's grown in the United States is whatever's grown in Hawaii. So we just don't have the growing conditions,
right.
for coffee. So just realistically,
It's
it's
not
just going to
possible.
be, yeah. So unfortunately, it's just the way it is. So, most of what we have is, Nicaragua, in our coffee that we create our different roasts from. But like, we decided to buy our bags. We can get them cheaper from China, but our bags are made in the U.S., just because of that. Um, these mugs that I'm drinking from, are made in the U.S. They cost more. We could get cheap ones from China, but now our stainless steel mugs, we have a double walled stainless mug. That's the one I actually use most of the time because even though it's a mug, that double wall keeps the coffee hotter longer. So I'm kind of a geek for keeping it hot as long as possible. I'm not aware of any double walled stainless stuff that's made even outside of China. Nothing in the US for sure, but I don't even know of other countries that make it. That's just kind of where it is. So that always seems to me like, I don't know what it takes to make a double walled stainless drinkware, but it seems to me like, I don't know, some company in the United States, I don't know, it just feels like this thing's waiting to happen for somebody to jump on that. But our shirts, we get made in the US. Again, they're not actually as much more as what you would think, but they do cost a little bit more. But, so where we can, we try to buy, yeah, stuff that's made in the U.S. And then of course, yeah, we're local here in Ohio, but we do ship to all 50 states, and every now and then we'll get an international order. Obviously, it's somebody who just wants to buy it for the sake of buying it. It's not, they're not just shopping for their next cup of coffee. They can just go to the store for that. So we don't ship a lot internationally, but it happens, which always makes me feel good. Like, wow, they're willing to pay that much in freight to get our coffee. So we really appreciate that. But, and normally, shipping's pretty quick. If you get out west, especially west of the Rockies, it takes a little bit longer. But yeah, it's where we can, and to the degree we can, we get stuff that's made in the U.S. For those reasons that you were talking about.
It kind of intrigues me to think about. I've never talked to anybody that's like neck deep in a coffee, the process, I guess, with, so maybe just for my curiosity, maybe explain kind of the process in a little more in depth as far as, what all goes into, someone just sees the bag and sees the grounds, they get it, and they just think that it just comes that way.
Right.
Like maybe
Right.
get into the whole process and like what it takes to produce, the final product,
Yeah.
or how you guys
Well,
do it, I guess.
yeah. So really, this starts back when Paul. I remember when he was telling our family. When I say our family, like my siblings and stuff, we get together, Thanksgiving, Christmas, that he was thinking about importing coffee, and it just was like, I didn't even have a box to put this idea in. Like, I don't. What are you talking? I mean, I know coffee, but what? And but that's his personality, is to see um something and try, sometimes jump, and where are we going to land? He has this ability to try something and not be afraid to try it. And so, and people warned him, if you try to buy farm direct, because that's how he started, was buying directly from farmers. He was in a missions organization. He was just looking for a way to help the farmers do better so they could become more self-supporting, because the mission he was with, um, did a lot of financial support of these communities. And so, he, he realized that if he would buy direct, he could bypass a lot of importers, middlemen, and pay the farmer that middleman cut. So not necessarily paying an inflated price, but they get the full thing rather than 5 or 6 middlemen each taking a slice. But Paul was warned that you can't do that, because these guys will send you a good sample of coffee, and then they'll send you a crappy load, and you're stuck. And Paul was advised that he has to become a Q grader, which is kind of like the equivalent of a wine taster. There's not a lot of in the U.S. I don't know, 300 some maybe nationally with active Q graders. There's probably more that can do it, but active. So it's not like every coffee shop wouldn't have a Q grader. But what it does is it creates a standard, and he has to go in for testing to get recertified periodically, so that a guy on the West Coast and the guy in Michigan and the guy in New Jersey test the same coffee, and they're going to be within about 1 point or so of each other. They're all going to test it the same. It creates a standard, and that way he would know. See, if you go through a broker, the broker does all that stuff. So buying direct, you got to be self-sufficient in that area. So Paul became a tea grader and started importing this coffee. And how he was buying from people he already had a relationship with through the mission work. So there was already a trust relationship established. So that took care of that issue. And then he decided to actually just start, roasting and selling him. He was just going to broker all the coffee at first, and then decided to start roasting it himself and selling it roasted. I don't know. I can't tell you how he does it, but there's each coffee will respond differently to a method of roast, whether to take the heat up pretty quickly and keep it up for a while, and then gradually cool it, or reverse. Keep it low, gradually build, and at the end crank it up. There's all these different methods of roasting that bring out different flavor profiles of the coffee, and so that's what Paul does, and that's the part that I don't have any comprehension of how you see a coffee and then figure out and experiment. Try this roast, try that roast, try this method, and then when you taste it, you have to be able to remember, or you maybe have multiple cups, and that's where his Q grade thing comes in, to be able to analyze the different flavorings that he gets out. That way you come up with a good roast for that coffee. And then some of our stuff is a blend. Like our original roast is a blend of different roasts put together, which creates then a little different profile. So that's all behind the scenes. Once the roast is established, then now it becomes a program that then give it to the roaster, and then the employee can do the actual roasting of the coffee. So yeah, it's roasted, and we keep it in. He keeps it in a green bag. It comes in a green bean form, and it stays in that until the day it's roasted. And then as soon as it's roasted, then it'll get packaged into very soon into bags, either as whole bean or it gets ground and then packaged. So it's not roasted long before it gets packaged, and then that's where that freshness comes in. A lot of people, most of us would think that like a dark roast is, oh, I want all the caffeine, I give it, give me a dark roast. And it's probably going to be about the same as a light roast. Technically speaking, the longer you roast coffee, you start to lose caffeine content. However, the longer you roast it, the more volume it loses, which means you use more beans to roast a bag of dark roast than you do a bag of light. So at the end of the day, I don't know how you'd calculate it, but it's probably going to be about the same because you actually have more beans in the dark roast. So
And I
it's
would
going to
bet that
make up for the loss.
myself and a lot of people have never knew that.
Right.
I'm today
No,
years old learning that
right.
a, what goes into a dark versus a light roast. I'm a
Right.
dark roast, like give it to me black,
Yep.
no creamer, no sugar, none of that junk.
Nice. Yeah.
But
Nice. Yeah.
that's another thing is like when you drink coffee a lot,
Hmm.
once you have that good, like a good quality cup versus, I don't want to call any of the big
Right.
whatever brands out, your Maxwell House or your
Right.
Folgers or whatever you can
Yeah.
just buy at Walmart in bulk or at Sam's Club, whatever. You buy a
Right.
big tin of the grounds. It's not going to be fresh, stay fresh for
Right.
long in that big quantity like that already ground.
Right.
And just having that small batch quality once you have it, or like
Yeah.
your local coffee shop that does all in house. If
Right.
you ever had that and you're like a coffee enthusiast, you get into it, you
Right.
can tell the difference in a good quality cup or blend versus
Yeah.
just your normal big box store.
Yeah. 100%. I think we're probably very similar in that. I'm far from a Q grader. If you ask me what notes are in there, yeah, I just like a dark, rich coffee. But I discovered the same thing once I started drinking, higher quality coffee, fresher roasted. I didn't need to use the creamer. I used to use a ton of cream, powdered creamer, and years ago. And I if you, I that was finally I figured it out. If this is really good coffee, I don't have to put this stuff in.
Right.
Oh, okay, all right. So I'm with you on that. That's same for me. Um, yeah, and then when you talk about light roasts, and those are getting more and more popular, those they call them fruity notes, citrusy, whatever. And for me personally, that doesn't sound like coffee. You know what I mean? We sell light roast and I drink it, but it's not, when I say I drink it, I mean, if it's there, I'll drink it, but um, that's not what, yeah, I'm with you. I just like it. I drink our black powder is what my wife and I drink every day. And,
Sure.
that's what does it for me. But if you have a bitter or burnt, dark roast, you can't drink it straight. You got to dump all kinds of crap in there. So I'm with you. If you have a good, uh, dark roast coffee, you can drink it straight, and it doesn't have those bitter finishes. It's still smooth.
Which you guys do. I enjoy it. And like you, I'm the darker the better. But
Yeah.
you guys have something for everybody. Like you said, you have something light. A lot of people are in the middle ground. They maybe work up. They've never drank coffee before.
Right.
I know a lot of people that, funny enough, are like, I love the smell of coffee in the morning, but I just can't drink it. So
Yeah. My
maybe
best friend is like that.
they dabble with the light, then they, work up, and then pretty
Right.
soon they're, dark roast too. But you guys
Right.
offer something for everybody. And like you said, you also offer somebody that likes a little bit more flavor, maybe,
Yep.
I think, I don't
Yeah.
know what it was called, but
Yeah. Java rum. It's kind of a, when you think of flavored coffee, sometimes they're pretty heavily flavored, and this is more like kind of half. So it's flavored, but it's not heavy. But it's vanilla, caramel, and rum kind of flavors added in there, and it's really good. Interestingly, vanilla and caramel are two of the notes. Like when you score coffee, those are two of the coffee notes that they talk about. So it's in enhancing the natural flavor of coffee, but it's just a mellow. It's really nice. I like it a lot. Um, and then our original roast is the one that's probably our most popular seller because it's kind of like a medium darkish roast. So it's just very very smooth. And there's we get that comment a lot like, wow, I don't need to use creamer anymore. So
It's
that's always a
probably
compliment.
that's a simple compliment that probably goes
It,
a long way.
yes, yep, sure is. Yeah,
All right. So we kind of talked hunting, we kind of talked coffee. We're almost an hour in, and we
yeah.
haven't touched on why you're in an arm sling. So maybe get into that little backstory on that.
Oh, well, I injured it about a year ago at the gym. I was doing muscle ups, and it was at the end of a workout. So I was just always finishing off my workouts with doing however many I could at the end. So you're kind of fatigued. And this particular day, because of my workout, I wasn't able to get one, and I just kept trying because I knew I could, and I never did. But the next day, my shoulder was killing me, and looking back now, I realized I tore my uh, partial tear in my rotator cuff. So I just didn't. I mean, I took 3 or 4 months to let it heal, but I didn't let it. It wasn't healed completely, and I didn't realize that was a pain I would feel after every workout for a day or two. It'd be sore. Like, oh, well, maybe it'll go away. And so yeah, here in early May, I was working out, and it literally gave out in the middle of a bench press, like it tore, like the bar just came down on me. And thankfully, I had a spotter. Um, but I told the doc that I said I felt like I heard it, but I said I know I didn't because the gym's loud. There's music, and he's like, "No, you probably did because you can hear it through your like bone structure or whatever." So yeah, 2 of them were off the bone. So I went in for surgery last Monday.
Okay.
So and thankfully, miraculously, I feel like I really haven't had any pain. I mean, the first number of days I had plenty of pain medication, but I haven't had pain meds now for several days, maybe a little here and there, but I mean, for the most part, no pain meds for
So
2, 3 days.
what did they tell you as far as like what's the recovery process for like a rotator cuff surgery or
Yeah,
like your rehab
eight
process for
weeks.
that?
Yeah, 8 weeks in the sling. Um, Now my arm that's why I was late to the phone call. My arm, a little concerned about the appearance of it, and because they also then cut the top of my biceps off and pulled it up and reattached because it was frayed. So they made a new attachment there. And uh, so I called in this morning. I asked about it, and they said to send some pictures. I don't know. Sound like they might be a little concerned. Like that's not what I want to hear, but we'll roll with it. So, assuming everything's okay, it's 8 weeks in a sling, and then that's when the actual rehab starts. But my follow up surgery is 2 weeks after the surgery, so next Monday. And then after that, I think they're going to have me start just doing gentle movement, like they call it pendulum swings, where you bend over and like swing your arm in a circle and have. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much movement there's going to be, and maybe that won't even be till the 8 weeks. I don't know. But it's 8 weeks in the sling and then rehab starts. So yeah, I'm figuring on 8 months to a year to get it really back. So I asked about bow hunting this fall. He said this is what you would call a season-ending injury. So
And I think I've heard a lot of people recently, maybe it's just because, with the, social media and people putting it out there now to kind of recognize it and whatnot. But a lot of people, it seems like that I know through, different things have had rotator cuff surgeries and then trying to work around the hunting season. And then it's like,
right,
I think
yeah,
people just need to really realize that it's like, it's an investment in your body.
yeah,
You just need to, rehab it
yeah,
good, do it right the
right,
first time, and then
right,
okay, it's one season
right,
versus you could have this be an issue and you could lose multiple seasons. So I
right.
think it's
Yeah,
definitely must be hard to go through that right before hunting season. But
right. Yeah, and I had a friend that did not see my two of my tendons were off the bone, so it wasn't like they were. What I would have done a year ago would have been an injury to a tendon, but at this injury here was they came off the bone. I mean, he said it's probably close to 3/4 inch separation from the bone. So I mean, there wasn't you couldn't I was going to rehab it. I wasn't going to do any surgery. But when he said, no, they're off the bone, you can't rehab it. There's nothing to rehab. You have to connect it first. So, um, I know a guy that, he put off his shoulder surgery until after bow hunting season. So, so he was ready to go for the next year, but his wouldn't have been the same, I don't think. I mean, his was probably an injury, where there was a partial tear. And those, if you're careful, then you could. But he still hunted. Rather than stand up and draw the bow back, how we do, he would bend down and like use his left hand to push the bow away to do his draw, and then came up, which probably wasn't smart because he could have torn it the rest of the way off. But he didn't practice or anything. He just waited till hunting season and only shot once or twice and got a deer, and then he was done. So yeah, I having injured it last year and realized the problem was that I didn't let it heal properly is good medicine for this time to realize that I need to take it slow and listen to my body better and realize
Right.
what the pain signals are saying.
Yeah. And I have just from previous, sports injuries and stuff, I've never had good shoulders. So whether I've never gone in and kind of had them checked out, and I'd like to think I'm still young at
Oh
27.
yeah.
So
Oh
I
yeah.
probably don't, not being, older, maybe if I was, it would be worse, but it's something to definitely keep in the back of your mind and not letting it, get worse. So at some point I might get mine checked out just from weightlifting and, during baseball pitching, you're always tearing
Right.
your shoulders up. And while you're trying to lift at that same time, you're never
Right.
letting your body kind of heal like it should.
Fully
The
heal.
recovery
Yeah.
process is really short. So I probably didn't do myself any
Right.
favors that way. But my dad's now in the same boat where he had to drop down poundage this year because he's very persistent on not going to a crossbow. And he's like, I want to hunt with a vertical bow as long as I possibly
Yep.
can. So I just
Yep.
got done setting him up with a 50-pound bow coming from he was at like 65, and he can finally drop back. That getting over that hump in the draw,
Yeah.
he was having
Right.
trouble doing that. So
Yep.
I don't know what issues are going on all of a sudden with his shoulders, but I mean he's not getting any younger either. So
Right.
it maybe be something for him to at least go in and get checked out, possibly having
Well,
some
an
sort of
MRI,
injury too.
yeah, an MRI tells, will say if there's any sort of injury there, but there's a lot of therapies you can do to rehab. It's very common for people. I've heard the majority of people in their whatever 50s and 60s and up will have, by that point in life, will have had torn their rotator cuff throughout. I realize now looking back, and I'm pretty sure I heard it, my left rotator cuff 20 years ago, and it's healed up, but I don't know if it's healed right. Um, but it's
Just maybe not. And I would like to think that even if you did tear it and then it naturally kind of just over time would heal
right.
itself,
Yep.
still without the proper uh, rehab and the proper exercises, trying to re-strengthen that up, I feel like just the mobility of it, like because I feel like even me, like when lifting weight over my head, like a press type of lift, or
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
even flies or something where you have to lift your shoulders weight above maybe shoulder level.
Right.
It doesn't seem like the functionality and the strength is there once it gets, it's just maybe that little bit of feeling weak, or
Right.
it just doesn't feel natural.
That could very well be what you're talking about. So like on my left side where I hurt that shoulder years ago, I don't know, 5 years ago I realized my left trap muscle is bigger than the right. I was like, what's going on? And I finally, I think, put the two together. Like my left shoulder isn't quite right, and so my trap is compensating. So like if I try to do an overhead squat, it's really rough because I can't get my left arm back as
Hmm.
well as I should. I was going to say exactly what you did. I think there's like shoulder rehab stuff that you can do that will strengthen all around that and get it correct back where you need it to be. And there's a lot of new developments now. PRP, which is platelet-rich plasma injections. They'll draw your blood, spin out the platelet-rich plasma, and then it's a mild form of stem cells, and then inject it into the point of injury, and that'll promote. It's big. It's a really effective at promoting healing and to help recover those, get those tendons to heal back together and stuff like that, or those, ligaments, whatever, um, muscles. So there's a lot of stuff before you have to have, uh, there's a lot of rehab stuff before you have to have surgery that I don't even know if unless the thing's off the bone, I think most rotator cuff injuries can be rehabilitated.
Right.
This is my opinion, but I did a lot of research on this before the MRI showed that it was off the bone. And there's a lot of research that you can do yourself, with rehab to get it back to where you want it. Because so if it takes you 6 months or a year to get it fully rehabbed, well, it's going to take that long if you have surgery. So, you know, just, doing it on your own, you can make a lot of headways that way.
And maybe this will be a little bit of a kick in the pants to somebody listening. If you're having shoulder issues or something that's gonna down the road turn into something that's gonna, affect your hunting or your
Yeah.
just everyday life and just make it tough on you, just get it checked out,
Yeah.
as soon as possible. But so I think we're gonna get to the point where I start wrapping this up. But we've been a little bit over an hour now. We went down a lot of rabbit holes, talked about some really good stuff, and this is going to be the first episode I'm going to release for the podcast. And I think I'm choosing to do that after our conversation because I think I never did like a intro podcast where I talk about like what my goals are or what I want to do. And I think this really encapsulates, what I want to have happen as far as guests, people that share the same mindset, just like to talk hunting. This isn't a faith-based podcast by any means, but I want to get to the point where before the guest comes on, I'm going to do a little intro about listener submissions. I want to have listeners send me through social media or whatever their favorite scripture reading or their favorite Bible verse and maybe talk about what that means to them related to hunting or just their life. I think I need to be better about, diving into scripture more. And I think it's a good way for, people to think about it, whether they listen to this podcast weekly and it just, people are busy and they maybe don't have time to get to church every week or, life's busy. I get that. That's the kind of the boat I'm in. So I think it could maybe bring that whole aspect into people's lives too and be able to, okay, before the podcast starts, you're here to talk about or listen about hunting and on conversations with certain guests, but just to take a couple minutes and kind of recognize that and recognize certain people, give them a shout out on the podcast. And I wanted to get to that point, but I know I mentioned when I reached out to you to be on, for you to bring your favorite scripture verse or your favorite verse and maybe talk a little bit about what it means to you, and we'll wrap up with that maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting when you asked that. The first verse that popped in my head, and it just kind of stuck with me. So it's hard to have one favorite verse. There's so many that are applicable at different times that have so much meaning. But what went through my mind was the verse that says, "For it is God who works in you to will and to act according to his good purpose." And when someone shared that verse with me 20, 30 years ago, or whatever it was, it was really impactful because of something I was struggling with. And it's the whole mindset of sometimes we feel like we're in this alone or that we're striving to, I don't know, attain, standing with God or, trying to achieve something or earn his credit and favor. And the reality is just the opposite, that he is the one that is working in you, that gives you the power. In fact, he is the one who even gives you the will, the desire to follow him, to do good, to obey, to surrender your life to Jesus. And so we're not in this alone. As much as you want good in your life, as much as you want to follow him. He wants it even more. And, so there's so much more power at work. This is not about us achieving his approval. He already is fighting for us, and he already paid the ultimate price through his son Jesus. And it turns things around from the striving to realizing that, oh, I've got the greatest, the ultimate power of the universe in my corner fighting for me. And that's for obviously each one of us. So you're not in this alone. God is in your corner, filling you with his power and even the desire to live, for him, with him.
And I think that's really powerful. And I don't know, I think it just relates to hunting in a way, because I know that, like I said, maybe you don't get to church or somewhere where you're around people that share the same faith as you as much as you want, and you're not reminded of all these things. But I feel like, for me anyways, when I'm in the woods, I'm always reminded of what he gives to us and what's out there, what he created. Like, there's just certain things you see when you're hunting, or out in the middle of nowhere. It's so desolate. Or watching the woods wake up in the morning, you're like, this only could come from one place. And you're just constantly reminded, with experiences you have out there alone, what you've been given, and what a privilege it is to be out there. Even like, we let all these things distract us about, like, oh, I didn't kill a deer this year, or my deer is not as big as his, or all these things. And it's like, that's not really what it's about. I don't know. I just think that, like you were talking about, just being reminded about what's really important. Like, I think anyways, for me, when I'm out in the woods, I'm just constantly reminded. It's a therapy session, and I always seem to kind of connect spiritually when I'm out there. So I think they kind of go hand in hand, hunting and faith. I just think there's so many ways they relate to each other. That
I think you're right. I just had this thought go through my mind when you were talking. Maybe there's more prayers prayed in the woods than in church. I mean, it's kind of funny, but kind of true, because the Bible talks about that creation testifies about God. Like, we see God, and I'm not talking about pantheism, like God is the rock. I don't mean that. I just mean it because it's his handiwork. He spoke all of this into existence. And when we're out there, we're closer to, like, our, if you want to call it, resonating or whatever with that frequency, however you want to look at it. Like, we're getting closer, we're getting away from other stuff, and we're getting closer to the creator. And you can't help but see, the heavens declare the glory of God, that these are all verses in the Bible that talks about how creation reflects who God is. You can't help but, how many, and just in that quiet, how many people are in their mind talking to God? Maybe they don't always realize it, but that's really what's happening. And, so I agree with you. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that was a great way to end, I think. Mike, let everybody know that's listening where they can, if they want to try some really, really good coffee, where they can do that, where they can find, those blogs or forums that you were talking about on your website, where people can follow along with you and or Hunter's Blend.
Yeah, you can go to huntersblendcoffee.com, to our website, and you've got all our coffee and merch there. If you scroll down through the menu, you'll see the link for Rut Functional, and that'll get you into the hunting side of things. And then most social media, I think Instagram and Facebook maybe are both just Hunter's Blend. I can't remember. We had to change. Anyway, you'll find it if you look up Hunter's Blend in YouTube, Hunter's Blend. So Hunter's Blend Coffee, I guess, on YouTube. We have a tendency to blow things up. So if you go to our YouTube channels, you'll see lots of fireballs and things like that.
I do really enjoy, like, the shorts that you put out that you're featured in all the time. Little kind of funny shorts. I'll be looking forward to some when you're in a sling. I'm sure you'll come up with some creative stuff with that, but I'm sure if people...
That's a good idea. I'll have to do that.
Yeah, for sure. But I'll link all that stuff in the description of this. Like I said, you're going to be episode number 1. I really enjoyed having you on. We talked about a lot of good stuff. So I hope everybody
Yeah.
enjoys it, but I do appreciate you joining me.
Thanks, Jake, and best wishes with the podcast.
Appreciate that.